Right, we're going to look at how to produce a sky where we've got rain clouds hovering overhead and the rain is just falling vertically down straight out of the clouds onto the land below. It's quite straightforward actually, because it's only replicating what actually happens in real life with real clouds and real rain. Okay, the brush I'm going to use is the large mop brush, but as with all of these skies, I'm just mixing and matching so you can see what sort of effect they produce. But you could really use any of the brushes with any of the skies. So don't follow slavishly a particular sky with a brush just because I happen to have used it. Right, and the colours we're going to use for this exercise are Payne's Grey, Phthalo Blue and Burnt Umber. And as you can see, they're fairly strong but fairly fluid washes. Not too watery, but certainly not too thick. Right, well, we're going to start with a wash of the Phthalo Blue, to which I've added a little bit of Burnt Umber. Now that gives us a greyish sort of blue that we're going to use for the most of the sky. And what I'm going to do, as with the graded wash, I'm putting some fresh water into the paint, then more water into the paint until we bring it down to a very, very pale, almost neat water wash over on the horizon. Now that's actually going to dry quite a bit paler, so I want to get some added colour in the top, because I can see that's getting fairly pale already. Not making any attempt to draw a cloud or paint clouds or anything like that, or any particular shapes, just to make the top area a little bit heavier. And right away you can see that you've got a ribbon of water that's run down from the cloud areas. Now what I'm going to do is dry off most of the water out of the brush. Now I'm just going to take off this little ribbon of water, or very dilute paint rather, that's run down. You can use what we call a thirsty brush like that, in other words a semi-dry brush, or you can just use plain old tissue like that. Now then, what I'm also going to do, I've tipped the board upside down, and the reason I'm doing that is that a lot of that heavier pigment that's come down towards the horizon will now fall back, if you like, up the sky, which is where I want it. I want this to be reserved for the hillsides and the lightest area, because even though it's a very rainy, dark, overcast day with lots of rain in the air, you're still going to get a slightly lighter halo near the horizon. And you can move this around in all sorts of different ways if you want. You can let it run this way and that way. While it's still wet, you can see that ribbon of paint now running down. I'm not worried about that, we'll get rid of that in a second. Actually, the hardest part of doing this particular sky is waiting long enough for the paint not to dry, but for the shine to go off the paper. Right, I think it's just about right now. There's still a bit of a glossy sheen on, but I want some wetness in the paper to allow the paint to run down as per the rain shadows. So I'm just going to now put a strongish mix of Payne's Grey into the sky mix like that. You can see it's picking up pigment as well as putting pigment down. Well, that's fine, because it gives us that sort of impression of very heavy, threatening clouds. I mixed a little bit of burnt umber with it, and you can see it's starting now to run away. You see here and there it's just starting to get on the move, particularly there. So what we'll do is we'll help it on its way by letting it drop down. You can see it's going to drop down vertically. It's going to dry back quite a bit, so it's not going to be quite that far down, but you can see what's happening. Let's take it back the other way, because we don't want it going too fast too far. And if you want it to be on an angle, we'll just hold the board on the corner like that, and that will get your rain. You see it's now running down at an angle, so you can even change your mind after you've started painting it. Okay, I think we'll leave that for now. Now I'm running the brush across to simulate some really heavy ugly clouds, but most of that realistically is going to run back in together, but it will give quite a subtle effect. There will be some degree of lightening off in those clouds, not a huge amount, but enough for what I want. So I'm actually exploiting now the ability or the desire of the water to fill these light patches back in. Right, I've let that run as far as I want to now. I'm going to put the hairdryer on it, and that'll stop it running anymore. In fact, it'll take it back a little bit. So there we are. I think we've achieved the objective. We've got these heavily laden clouds depositing the tons of rain straight out of the sky onto the waiting landscape below. And just to add to the very sombre and desolate atmosphere, we've put in a hillside, a lonely road, and this poor lonely tree here in splendid isolation, trying to shield itself from the heavy rain above. Oh yeah, and the other point I just wanted to mention was that in the distance here I've continued the sky down in effect into these trees by simply dabbing out the tree line when it was still very, very wet, and you get that sort of misty atmospheric effect. Again, another example of the lost and found edge that's very, very useful for you. So there we are, the rainy sky.